Most of us rarely stop to think about what it means to have something as simple as clean water, a safe place to sleep, or enough food for the next day. We live with these things so closely that they can begin to feel ordinary. But in some parts of the world, none of them are guaranteed. Imagine a place where hundreds of thousands of people are forced into a single square kilometer, where garbage is thrown into the same river people depend on to wash, to cook, and sometimes even to drink. Where fire can spread in minutes, where disease never feels far away, and where the question is not how to build a better future, but how to survive the next day. In places like these, even the smallest parts of daily life become difficult. Privacy disappears. Safety becomes fragile. A shared family meal, something so normal in many homes, can become almost impossible in spaces too cramped for people to sit together. And yet, for millions, this is not a temporary emergency. It is life as they know it. What makes these places even harder to understand is that many of them are not empty pockets of despair. Some are alive with trade, labor, and relentless human movement. Some generate astonishing amounts of money every year, even while surrounded by filth, overcrowding, and extreme hardship. People stay not because life is easy there, but because leaving may mean losing the only chance they have to earn a living. In this documentary, we travel into some of the harshest slums on Earth, places built on black water, beside garbage, along poisoned canals, beneath the shadow of wealth, and inside cities that have grown faster than dignity could keep up. These are places of hunger, smoke, waste, fear, and exhaustion. But they are also places of endurance. Because even in the hardest corners of the modern world, people continue to build routines, raise children, protect one another, and hold on to the hope that tomorrow might be a little less cruel than today. This is a journey into the world's hardest slums, and into the lives of the people who still call them home. Makoko, the floating slum of Lagos. If there is one place that immediately forces you to rethink what a city can become when too many people are left behind, it is Makoko. Set against the vast sprawl of Lagos, one of Africa's largest and fastest moving cities, Makoko feels like another world entirely. Here there are no shining towers, no polished business districts, no illusion of urban comfort. Instead, what rises from the dark water is a dense maze of wooden homes, fragile walkways, and narrow canoes moving through channels filled with waste, mud, and decay. Makoko is often described as one of the largest floating slums in the world. And when you first see it, that description hardly seems enough. Thousands of rough wooden structures stand above black water on stilts, packed so tightly together that space itself seems to have disappeared. In many of these homes, entire families live in rooms so small and so exposed that privacy becomes almost meaningless. Life is compressed into the bare minimum. The water beneath them is not simply part of the landscape, it is part of the hardship. Waste and sewage often flow directly into it. Trash collects in thick layers along the surface. And yet this same water remains tied to daily life. Children move through it. Boats cross it. People wash near it. In a place where clean infrastructure barely exists, danger becomes ordinary. And still, Makoko is not silent. It is full of movement. Canoes glide between homes like small streets on water. Fishermen head out in search of a catch. Traders carry goods through the settlement. Children grow up learning how to balance, paddle, and navigate this unstable world almost as soon as they can walk. What looks from the outside like collapse is from within, a place held together by routine, adaptation, and necessity. That may be the hardest truth about Makoko. It is not simply a disaster, it is also a living community. Many of its residents did not come here by choice, in the way comfort allows us to imagine choice. They came because Lagos promised work, survival, and the possibility of staying afloat in a city that keeps pulling more people in. For many, Makoko became the only place they could afford to exist. Its origins reach back more than a century, when fishing communities settled here and built their lives around the water. Over time, that settlement expanded, absorbing migrants from across the region, until it became one of the most striking symbols of urban inequality in modern Africa. Just beyond Makoko, Lagos continues to project ambition, wealth, and growth. But here, in the shadow of that promise, another reality remains in plain sight. And yet even here, people keep trying to build something better. Families endure, children study, small local efforts emerge. Even in a place shaped by neglect, there are attempts to create structure, dignity, and hope. Makoko is not just a floating slum. It is what happens when human resilience is forced to survive on water that should never have become a home. Dharavi, the slum that runs on work. If Makoko feels like survival balanced on water, Dharavi feels like survival driven by motion. At first glance, it looks like the kind of place the modern world would rather not see. The lanes are narrow, the buildings pressed together, the air heavy with heat, smoke, dust, and waste. Space is so limited that daily life spills out into the alleys. People cook outside, wash outside, sort materials outside, work outside. Privacy is rare, silence is rarer. And yet Dharavi is not a place defined by stillness or defeat. It moves, it hums, it produces. Set in the heart of Mumbai, one of the most expensive and crowded cities on earth, Dharavi stands as one of the most extraordinary urban contradictions anywhere in the world. It is widely known as one of Asia's largest slums, but that description captures only part of the truth. Dharavi is also a giant informal economy, a place where hundreds of thousands, and by some estimates more than 1 million people, live and work inside an intensely compressed landscape that never seems to stop. This is what makes Dharavi so striking. It is poor, but it is not idle. Inside its crowded maze are thousands of tiny workshops and family-run operations. Leather goods, pottery, textiles, food production, metalwork, recycling, and countless forms of manual labor that feed into the larger economy of Mumbai and beyond. Waste collected from across the city is sorted, cleaned, repurposed, and turned back into value. Objects discarded elsewhere begin a second life here. In that sense, Dharavi does not just endure the modern city, it helps sustain it. That paradox is impossible to ignore. In a place often associated with overcrowding, filth, and hardship, enormous economic activity continues day after day. Money flows through spaces that on paper should barely function. Labor gives the settlement its pulse. Work gives it structure. And for many people here, that work is the reason they stay. But the cost of that survival is visible everywhere. Homes are often stacked tightly together, sometimes serving as both living space and workshop. Entire families may share a single room. Ventilation is poor. Access to water can be limited and unreliable. Drainage is often inadequate. In some parts of Dharavi, the smell of chemicals, smoke, sewage, and damp concrete settles into the air and never fully leaves. The city depends on what this place produces, but far fewer people want to confront the conditions under which that production happens. There is also another uncomfortable truth here. Even poverty can become expensive. In a district so economically active and so close to the center of Mumbai, space carries value. Even the smallest rooms can cost more than outsiders might expect. Dharavi may look fragile, but it exists on land that matters. That makes it not only a place of poverty, but also a place of pressure, competition, and control. And still, people build lives here. Children go to school, families form routines, neighbors depend on each other. Small businesses continue in rooms barely large enough to stand in. In the middle of congestion and hardship, a kind of order emerges. Improvised, imperfect, but real. Does not simply a slum of need, it is a slum of effort. A place where poverty does not appear as emptiness, but as relentless labor. And that may be what makes it so unsettling. Because here, work is everywhere, and still, for so many, it is not enough to escape. Guryong, Seoul's hidden poverty. When people think of Seoul, they usually picture speed, wealth, glass towers, flawless technology, and a city that seems to belong to the future. But just a short distance from Gangnam, one of the richest and most polished districts in South Korea, there is another Seoul. A quieter one, a forgotten one. A place that reveals what prosperity can hide when a city grows faster than its compassion. This is Guryong. Here the contrast is almost hard to believe. Only minutes away from luxury apartments, designer stores, and corporate headquarters, rows of makeshift homes stand patched together from metal sheets, plywood, plastic, tarps, and whatever else people could find. The skyline of wealth is close enough to feel almost cruel. It is there, visible, glittering, and completely out of reach. Guryong does not shock in the same way as Makoko or Dharavi. It is not defined by black water or industrial density. Its power comes from something quieter, the humiliation of poverty existing in full view of abundance. Many of the people who live here are elderly. Some spent their lives working low-income jobs and were pushed aside by the cost of the modern city. Others survive on small state payments that are nowhere near enough to keep pace with Seoul's housing prices. For them, Guryong became the last possible refuge. Not a place to live well, but a place to remain within the city at all. The homes are fragile and cramped. Some ceilings are so low that standing upright is difficult. Walls are thin, roofs leak, and repairs are often little more than temporary fixes layered over older damage. There is very little comfort here, only improvisation. People live close to fire, close to flooding, close to the slow collapse of structures that were never meant to last. And yet this is not only a place of physical hardship, it is also a place of emotional displacement. Because in Guryong, poverty is not hidden on the far edge of the nation. It exists beside some of the most expensive land in the country. That proximity changes everything. It turns hardship into a visible contradiction. It raises a question no modern city likes to answer. What happens to those who cannot keep up with the price of success? In winter, residents rely on basic heating methods that can increase the risk of fire. During heavy rains, flooding becomes a serious threat. Public bathrooms and shared facilities often replace anything private. The dangers are constant but ordinary. For many residents, daily life is not about progress, it is about holding on. And still, even here, life gathers itself. There are small places of worship, shared routines, familiar faces, informal networks of care. In a settlement built from neglect, people still manage to create fragments of belonging. That may be the most human part of Guryong, not the poverty itself, but the quiet refusal to disappear inside it. Guryong reminds us that hardship does not always live far away, in distant corners of the world. Sometimes it survives right next to wealth, hidden in the shadow of towers, waiting behind the polished image of a city that would rather not be interrupted by it. Manila, eating from the garbage. If Guryong reveals poverty hidden beside wealth, Manila shows something even harder to face. What happens when hunger pushes people to the edge of dignity? In parts of Metro Manila, garbage is not just waste. For many families, it becomes food. Across the city's poorest districts, countless people live in overcrowded settlements built beside dumps, polluted waterways, rail lines, and unstable ground. Their homes are patched together from scrap wood, rusted metal, tarps, and salvaged materials, packed so tightly that fire can spread in minutes. The air is heavy with heat, sewage, smoke, and rot, and each day begins with the same question: What can still be found, sold, or eaten? That question leads to one of the most disturbing realities in the Philippines' urban slums: pagpag. The term refers to discarded food, often leftover fried chicken from fast food trash, collected, cleaned as best as possible, cooked again, and sold cheaply to people who cannot afford anything else. To outsiders, it sounds unimaginable, but where regular meals are uncertain and income barely covers a single day, even that becomes part of survival. This is what makes the hardship in Manila so difficult to absorb. Hunger does not always look like famine. Sometimes it looks like compromise, like risk, like washing spoiled meat one more time and hoping it will not make your child sick. Many families survive through scavenging, sorting recyclables, carrying loads, or doing whatever work they can find. Trash itself becomes an economy. Plastic can be sold, metal can be sold, and sometimes even discarded food can be sold again. But hunger is only part of the danger. Fire is a constant threat. Homes are built from highly flammable materials entangled with makeshift electrical lines. When flames break out, entire rows of houses can disappear within minutes. And after the fire, families often return to the ashes, searching for anything that can still be used. Disease is never far away either. Floodwater mixes with sewage. Garbage rots in the heat. Children grow up surrounded by contamination. Yet life continues because it has to. Mothers still cook. Fathers still search for work. Children still eat whatever is available. That may be the hardest part to understand. Even here, family life goes on. Meals are still shared. Children are still cared for. Small routines survive in the middle of extreme hardship. Manila's poorest communities reveal a brutal truth about modern city life. Sometimes survival depends not on what a city provides, but on what it throws away. Rocinha, life inside Rio's biggest favela. If Manila shows what hunger can do, Rocinha shows what happens when poverty rises on a hillside and learns to live under permanent tension. Clinging to the slopes above Rio de Janeiro, Rocinha is the city's largest favela, a vast, crowded world of stacked homes, tangled wires, steep alleys, and endless movement. From a distance, it can look almost unreal, as if the hillside itself had been covered in concrete and brick. But up close, it is a place shaped by pressure, improvisation, and survival. Everything here feels compressed. Houses are built tightly against one another, sometimes rising floor above floor, with little planning and even less safety. Narrow passageways twist through the neighborhood, too tight for comfort, too busy for silence. Space is scarce, privacy is limited, and daily life unfolds in full view of everyone around you. But Rocinha is not only crowded, it is also unstable. For years, the favela has lived under the shadow of violence tied to drug trafficking, armed gangs, and repeated clashes with police. Raids, gunfire, and fear have become part of the atmosphere of life. For residents, danger does not always announce itself. Sometimes it arrives suddenly, in the middle of an ordinary day, turning streets, stairways, and doorways into places of risk. And yet Rocinha is not defined by fear alone. This is also a place of energy, identity, and culture. Music spills from windows, street art colors the walls, small shops, food stalls, salons, and local businesses keep the neighborhood alive from morning into night. Families build routines here. Neighbors know one another. Life continues with a force that outsiders often fail to understand. That tension is what makes Rocinha so powerful. It is a place of hardship, but also a presence. A place where poverty is visible everywhere, yet so is human vitality. People do not merely endure here. They adapt, improvise, and keep going in the middle of conditions that would exhaust almost anyone. Rocinha also exposes one of Brazil's deepest contradictions. Just beyond the favela are some of Rio's wealthier districts, with their ocean views, private buildings, and polished image of urban beauty. The distance between those worlds is small on a map, but enormous in lived reality. In Rocinha, that divide becomes impossible to ignore. It is not only a neighborhood, it is a reminder that modern cities can contain entirely different realities side by side. One protected, one exposed, one celebrated, one feared. One looking out over the city, and one fighting every day just to remain inside it. Kibera, surviving Nairobi's endless slum. There are places where poverty feels temporary, as if the city has simply failed for a moment. Kibera does not feel that way. Kibera feels permanent. Spread across a vast stretch of Nairobi, it is often described as one of Africa's largest slums, a place where hardship is not tucked away in some forgotten corner, but laid out in plain sight through corrugated metal roofs, narrow footpaths, open drains, smoke, mud, and relentless overcrowding. From above, it seems to keep going without end, as though the city kept expanding but never made room for everyone it pulled in. What makes Kibera so overwhelming is not just its size, but its density of struggle. Nearly every part of daily life demands effort. Water has to be found, food has to be earned, illness has to be endured, safety can never be assumed. Even walking through the neighborhood means stepping carefully through mud, waste, broken ground, and the fragile boundaries between one family's life and the next. Sanitation remains one of the settlement's harshest realities. In some areas, the lack of proper toilets has forced residents to rely on plastic bags for human waste, the so-called flying toilets, a phrase that sounds almost unreal until you understand that for many people, there has long been no other practical option. It is one of those details that reveals how deep abandonment can go when a settlement grows faster than any state response. And yet the hardship of Kibera is not only physical, it is social, medical, and psychological. Crime, addiction, disease, and insecurity shape everyday life, especially for women and children. Clean water is limited. Medical access is inconsistent. Overcrowding turns every outbreak, every accident, every crisis into something larger than it should be. But Kibera is not lifeless. That is what makes it so difficult to reduce to statistics. Markets appear in the middle of disorder. Small shops line the pathways. People cook, carry, repair, sell, and build whatever kind of stability they can from almost nothing. Families hold together. Children still play. Neighbors still rely on one another. Even here, life refuses to disappear. Kibera is not simply a slum, it is a parallel city. One built not through planning, but through necessity. A place where millions of acts of endurance have been repeated for so long that survival itself has become part of the landscape. Orangi town, Karachi's city of neglect. Not every slum overwhelms you at first sight. Some do it more slowly, through scale, heat, disorder, and the feeling that too much has been left unattended for too long. That is Orangi town. On the outskirts of Karachi, one of the world's largest cities, Orangi has grown into a vast settlement shaped by migration, overcrowding, weak infrastructure, and long-term neglect. It is often described as one of Asia's largest slums, and the scale of it makes that easy to believe. What defines Orangi is accumulation. Too many people, too little planning, and too few services. Homes are built from brick, tin, cement, and improvised materials. Streets are crowded and uneven. In many areas, drainage is poor or missing altogether, so wastewater and garbage have nowhere to go. Under extreme heat, the smell lingers, and disease spreads more easily where sanitation and clean water remain unreliable. But infrastructure is only part of the burden. Orangi has also lived for years with gang activity, local tensions, and recurring violence that make daily life even more fragile. In places like this, neglect does not stop with roads or sewers. It reaches into the social fabric. When order is absent, other forces move in. And yet Orangi is not only a place of collapse. What sets it apart is that many residents did not simply wait for help. Over time, local communities created practical solutions themselves, especially in sanitation. The best-known example is the Orangi pilot project, through which residents helped build low-cost sewer systems when the city failed to provide them. That matters because Orangi is not just a symbol of neglect. It is also a symbol of people trying to build structure and dignity where almost none was given. Still, resilience does not erase the hardship. Orangi exists because millions needed somewhere to go, and the city grew without protecting them. What remains is a place where survival depends on working around everything a functioning city should have already provided. Rać, living beside a poisoned canal. Some slums rise on hillsides, some spread across open ground. This one clings to the edge of water that no longer feels like water at all. In Ho Chi Minh City, along the canal known as Rać, families have built fragile homes beside a dark, heavily polluted waterway burdened by trash, sewage, and years of neglect. The canal cuts through dense parts of the city, but along its banks, another world appears. One of cramped shelters, foul air, and daily life lived only a few feet from contamination. Many of the homes here are makeshift, assembled from corrugated metal, scrap wood, and whatever materials people could afford. Entire families may share extremely small spaces, with almost no privacy and little protection from heat, rain, or flooding. The smell of rot and wastewater hangs in the air, turning the canal into a constant presence in every part of life. Most residents are low-income workers or migrants from poorer provinces who came to the city hoping to earn enough to survive. But for many, formal housing remained out of reach, so they settled where they could, along the canal, on unstable ground, in structures that were never meant to last. The deeper tragedy is that the water beside them is not just dirty, it shapes the hardship around them. Waste flows into it, flooding spreads it, disease follows it, and when heavy rains come, the canal can overflow, pushing filthy water back into the homes of people who already live with almost nothing. And yet, even here, people endure. They work, cook, raise children, and hold on to whatever stability they can create. Rać is not only a place of pollution, it is a reminder of what happens when a fast-growing city leaves its poorest residents to live beside the very waste it cannot contain. Sattola, where fire can take everything. In some slums, the greatest fear is hunger. In others, disease. In Sattola, it is fire. In Dhaka, one of the most crowded cities on earth, settlements like Sattola are packed with families living in tiny rooms made of wood, tin, plastic sheets, and other fragile materials. Space is so limited that several people may share a room barely large enough to sleep in. The heat builds quickly, the air barely moves, and every part of life feels compressed. Water is difficult to access. Sanitation is poor. Waste gathers close to where people cook, sleep, and raise children. Many residents came from poorer rural areas, hoping the city would offer work, but instead found themselves trapped in another form of hardship, one where survival depends on daily wages that often barely cover food. But what makes places like Sattola especially terrifying is how quickly everything can disappear. When fire breaks out in settlements this dense, it moves with frightening speed. Homes stand almost on top of one another, built from materials that burn easily, and narrow passages make escape more difficult. In just a short time, entire sections can be reduced to ash. Families who owned almost nothing can still lose everything they had. That is the cruelty of places like this. Even the little people manage to build. A roof, a bed, a few cooking pots, a corner of belonging, can vanish in a single night. And still, people return. They rebuild. They patch walls together again. They keep living in the same danger because there is nowhere else to go. Sattola is a harsh reminder that in the world's most overcrowded urban margins, survival is not only about enduring poverty, it is also about living with the knowledge that one spark can erase your entire life. Neza-Chalco-Itza, the slum city beyond Mexico City. At the edge of Mexico City, the urban landscape begins to change. The towers thin out, the polished image fades, and stretching outward is a place so large, so crowded, and so neglected that it feels less like a neighborhood and more like a city built from survival itself. This is Neza-Chalco-Itza. Often described as one of the largest poor urban zones in the world, it spreads across the outskirts in endless rows of tightly packed homes, rough streets, exposed infrastructure, and neighborhoods shaped by poverty, migration, and relentless pressure. What makes it striking is not one dramatic image, but the sheer scale of hardship repeated block after block. Many families live in modest one-room or unfinished homes, often built gradually over time with whatever money and materials were available. Services can be inconsistent. Streets in poorer sections may turn muddy in rain and dusty in heat. Crime, insecurity, and economic struggle are part of daily life for many who live here. And yet, this is not a place without effort. It is full of people working, selling, fixing, carrying, building, and doing whatever they can to keep life moving. Informal labor holds much of this world together. Neighbors support one another. Families adapt. Survival here is rarely passive. That is what makes Neza-Chalco-Itza such a powerful final stop. It shows that modern urban poverty is no longer always a small settlement hidden from view. Sometimes it becomes an entire city on the margins of another one, vast, permanent, and impossible to ignore. Neza-Chalco-Itza stands as a reminder that when cities grow faster than justice, millions are left to construct their own version of stability from dust, concrete, strain, and persistence. These places are harsh, crowded, and often heartbreaking, and yet millions remain. Not because life there is easy, but because leaving can mean losing work, community, and the only fragile chance to survive. In the end, the world's hardest slums are not only about poverty, they are about endurance, about how far people will go to hold on to life, even in places that seem to offer so little in return.